So it's currently 11:45. I think we are going to start on time in the interest of time.
Absolutely, because we've got a lot to share with you this morning. It is still morning, right? It feels like a long day already. Anyway, welcome. Thank you for attending our session today. It's how to keep your board active and engaged. And I know during COVID, we've gotten a lot of challenges. So let's just kick it off right away. Let me introduce myself and my colleague here. I am Ann Bruttell. I am the owner of Meeting Coordinators. And as of this year, we've been in business for 32 years. So let's hope COVID keeps us alive until 33 at least, which I think is going to happen. We're an association and meeting management company, which means that we manage a lot of nonprofits and a lot of association programs that go on throughout the year. So between Marcy and I hate to say it, but we probably have got about 50 years experience shared here, if not more by my part. Anyway, happy to help today, and I'm always willing to get questions and call me or email me or text me, however it is that you're most comfortable with. So thank you for this opportunity today. And let me introduce my colleague here, Marcy Dwyer, who has been with Meeting Coordinators for, I'm not going to add up the years. Anyway, Marcy's been working with me for a very long time here. Welcome, Marcy, and please share with us a little bit about yourself.
Happy to be here with everyone today. I have got a background in working with nonprofits and boards for many, many years, as Ann's mentioned. I'm also happy to be an active volunteer for the Michigan Society of Association Executives, where I have been one of their academy instructors for the past, I think, 7 or 8 years. My areas are membership, board development, and financial turnaround. So I'm happy to share some of that information with you today. We only have 40 minutes, so we're going to kind of keep this moving, but we do encourage everyone in the audience to make comments in the chat, ask questions, and we'll try and catch those as we go along.
Fantastic. Okay, so I guess to answer the very basic question, what is a successful board? In my eyes, a successful board is one that you think is working for yourself. What I find successful for one board is not necessarily successful for the next one. And so I think that is up to you to define what you find is successful. For me, it certainly is one when everyone is engaging, when everyone is participating, and when the nonprofit is moving forward in the direction that we're all pleased about and fulfilling our mission and our goals for that year. So that's what I find. And I guess I'm going to throw in also, I think it's successful when also I'm having fun, when I enjoy working with them. So you have to work that in a little bit. So what do you think, Marcy? What's your definition of a successful board?
So mine, to keep it simple, is a board that is serving its mission, and the mission is relevant and current for the membership that it serves. Also, while conducting that service to their membership, they're fiscally responsible for the life of the organization. But again, I'll reiterate with Ann, a successful board has to be discussed with your board so that everyone's on the same page as what you mean with a successful board. Another great thing to do is showcase the examples of other boards that are very active to your board so that they can get some ideas of what that means for them.
Exactly. So we're gonna go through a number of ideas here as to things that have worked with some of our organizations and the boards that we work with. But if you've got a specific question, please throw it into the chat if there's a problem that you're having, and we can work on that directly, or you can contact us even individually afterwards.
So now we want to move on to an active board, or how you define engagement. So the word engagement is used a lot these days. And if you look at the dictionary definition, you see that engagement may be the two people agreeing to set an appointment, or like a dinner engagement, meeting at a certain time. So they've made a commitment, they're meeting at a certain time. And their common dictionary definition is an engagement is like a contract or a promise, like when you get engaged to be married. I think when we talk about engagement in nonprofits, we're really talking about activities, tasks, work towards completion. And so it's more about accomplishments when we talk about engagement. I think it's really important that you define what an active board is and what engagement is for your organization. And in your onboarding of board members, give examples of what that is. Another part about being active or engaged is making connections. And Ann, I want you to share your 3x5 story about making connections between board members and activity.
And this is one kind of near and dear to my heart. I don't know if you know about this one, Sheila, but as Sheila does know, that I was chairman of the board for the Troy Chamber of Commerce a very long time ago. And it was during an interesting time where I was chairman, vice chairman, and then I got onto the board and I was appointed then, vice chairman, but almost immediately the chairman had to resign. So all of a sudden, boom, I was thrown into the chairmanship position. And I really had not worked with any of these board members for a very long time, so that I did not really know them at all. And so what I did is I did my homework and developed 3x5 cards. Excuse me, I'm front with her. 3x5 cards on every single board member as to who they were, what their background was, what their involvement with the chamber has been, and even had phone calls directly with them to find out what their schooling background was, what their interests were, why they were active even on the board. And so on these 3x5 cards, and this is in the day when we weren't computered and there were no, cell phones that we're carrying around, so they were 3x5 cards, brought them into my first board meeting and actually used them to introduce every single board member, so that I wanted everyone in the room to know everything that I knew about each one of those board members. And the fun thing about that was it meant that we could get them engaged. Then everyone knew everyone at the same level, which was extremely helpful. And the fact that we knew then, even if a person wasn't the treasurer, if they were speaking, they were perhaps a CPA, even though that they were a business owner, but they also, their background in training they were a certified, a financial planner or whatever it was, so that we knew them when they were speaking at a board meeting, they were addressing a subject not only as interested for the subject, but that their knowledge was deeper than just a generic director position, if that makes sense to you. And so that helped us a lot with, when we had CPAs or lawyers or masters in business and so forth on the board, that their education really helped us also when we were talking with them. I will say, to this very day, I'm getting razzed about my 3x5 cards. I periodically get a card in the mail, and I know, which former board member it was that would have sent that to me. But the other fun thing is, it was a very engaging board. We really knew one another. We knew one another's families, and therefore then knowing them on a personal level was fantastic. And even to this day, almost like 20 years later, we get together at least once a year, which is just remarkable. So I don't know if everyone's boards can be that. I mean, that really was an unusual situation, but it was a very enlightening situation, and it has really helped me throughout my career. So there you go. Marcy, what else?
Again, I think Ann's example of personal connections and what we can do to foster those personal connections makes for a more active board and a more engaging board. But again, we want to make sure you take away, you need to have these conversations with your board so you define what activity engagement means for you and what is success. We're going to keep moving, but please make any comments in the chat or if you have any questions.
Okay, let me just say on this. This is very small print, and we really don't expect you to be reading this right now. But this is just brought forward for you to realize that what kind of a board do you really have? Have you sat back and thought about it? I know a lot of us just end up you're doing the work, and so therefore then you're not really thinking about it. But the fact that is it a strategic board that you're on, or is it a working board, or do you have a combination of both? And that's really important to know. And so we won't really necessarily go into it, or Marcy, you can probably give even greater insight as to specifically what a strategic board is and what a working board is.
So again, we're going to let you read this. These slides will be available. But we want to make sure that you have a conversation with your board on that they need to be working at both ends. Many of us who work at state associations or local regional organizations are working with boards that are very operational in nature. Make sure that we're taking the time to pull them up to the strategic level and that forward thinking. And so that's an important part of your board's activity. That will then help you with success and information. So again, a lot more you can bring to your board about being strategic and how to be in that role, but something to focus on. Just give us 1 second. We're having trouble.
There's our slide. Okay. Do any of you know about, or if you don't, maybe you should, whoops, we went one too fast. does anyone know the organization, the American Society of Association Executives? Let me just say, as a little show and tell here, my workout morning, they've printed the book. They've written the book on everything it is that a lot of us need to know. And this book is really, it's been updated, but I think maybe the last printing was 2016 or something like that. But that gives you a lot of guides and samples. Anyway, it is a book printed, published and printed by them. You can go to the American Society of Association Executives and, you know, and go to their book library and probably even purchase a copy. But I find it very effective, or a good reference model, even for someone like me and Marcy. We've been in the industry for how long? A lot of times there comes a day when it's like, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to develop that form all by myself again, or read, you know, so that we just go to their reference guide and pull it from there. But there are 3 major functions of a board, and they are, as you can see by the slide, it's their oversight, their insight, and their foresight. And I know that this is a subject that Marcy loves to talk about, so I'm actually going to turn it over to her because she loves working with these boards that way. Marcy, take it away.
So these are some tips to make your boards more effective. First, let me answer a question from Joanne Preston about the last slide. Yes, you saw the term operational board and working board interchangeable, and you're exactly right. Sometimes we talk about our boards being operational in nature or focusing on day-to-day operations, so the word working doesn't scare them off and they feel they have to do too much.
If you'll see in the chat, Joanne Preston says, doesn't it scare people if you call it a working board? And that doesn't mean that you have to call it that. You just have to know that that's what it is. I wouldn't maybe necessarily tell the board that unless that's what your working relationship is with them.
So let me bring you about the 3 major functions of a board from the book. Here are professional practices done by ASAE. And a shout out to Sue Radwan, our own Michigan resident, who is co-editor of this book. It's definitely worth read. So 3 major functions of a board: oversight, insight, and foresight. To give you some examples, oversight is some of the information that you do cover to your board to keep them up to date, to make sure that you are compliant, meeting your strategic goals, that you are fiscally responsible, that you're meeting your mission. Some examples of how you can do oversight is setting up a procedure so there's some regular reporting to the board. This could be a membership report where you report on your accounts monthly. It could be your financial reports that you share with your board and train them how to read those financial reports so they're doing their financial responsibility and making sure that the money and things are in order. It could be program updates on different programs or educational things that you're doing for your organization. Those are things you can do to improve the communication about oversight. Insight is making sure people are connected to the voice of members. Things that could be done are surveys to your members on a regular basis. You can encourage your board to set up interview schedules where they each interview so many members to try to get that outside opinion. Another great thing for insight is bringing people to your board meetings that are not voting members. You could have a student representative. You could have a representative of a particular group of people on your members. You could rotate those visitors, but bringing in those outside voices to provide that insight to your board, I think, is an important part, and many things that nonprofits don't take the time to do. The last is foresight. Foresight is encouraging your board to be strategic and look forward to the future. You could bring in outside speakers, futurists. A shout out to an organization, Certified Public Accountants. They regularly, on a 2-year basis, will do a projection into the future on a certain topic, or they'll talk about what accounting work will look like 10 years from now. That projection in the future is a great tool they bring to not only their board, but their members on foresight to help discuss some of those what ifs in the future and how your organization should adapt to be servicing those needs. Ann, do you have anything to move on?
I think, you know, it's even at the point where you have to bring in the people to your board that maybe don't think exactly like you do. This is an opportunity to, you know, address the squeaky wheel and really make them feel like they were heard by through your membership, and so that you, or that, you know, bring in somebody or even have a board member do the devil's advocate, you know, that let me take the other point of view. I think that sometimes we just get too comfortable in what role we are doing, that we need to actually look outside that and say, okay, you know, where is the problem area. I'll say a problem area, and that how can we bring that forward and so address it head on so that it doesn't become, just a, problem that's kicked on down the line, for future, to look at.
I'd be very encouraging everyone in the chat. If you have examples of what you do for your organization to improve oversight, insight, or foresight, share that with the group and put the word insight, we do this, or foresight, we do this. The last part of this slide we won't go over in detail, but this is from a study done by the American Society of Association Executives of Successful Boards. They interviewed over 400 organizations, and the 3 main points that rose to the top were boards that accomplished a strong strategic orientation, a culture of self-assessment and accountability, and healthy attention to recruitment of future board members. I would ask you if your organization are doing these things today.
Oh, this is just something, and I know you can't read it very well, but yeah, Marcy's going to hold up the book again. This is just one example of something that's in the book for you to be thinking about, and as to, where you stand with your own board, and some, possible questions that you should be thinking about. So anyway, it's just a working tool. I can send it to you if you can't read that very clearly, or if you're interested in that.
Also reach out to us if you'd like other self-assessment tools that we can send to you.
Absolutely. Problematic board issues. Okay, I think if any of you are on this call today, or on this meeting today, it's probably for that reason. It's probably because you have run into some problems, and that things may not be running as smoothly. Probably there isn't an issue that we probably haven't run into. I mean, we've had all of these things: the troublemaker, someone not doing the work, an introvert on the board, a board that has kind of gone flat, personality clashes, and those that want to break the law. So each of these we certainly have had to deal with numerous times over the years. And so Marcy and I were going to address some of this, but these are things that if you have something specific, I'd love to, talk to you even personally about that. Maybe then, we can help you with, if you've got the troublemaker or someone not doing the work, and really address whatever your personal issue is. But anyway, first to talk about, and I think Marcy and I'll probably go back and forth here. One of the most problematic, I think, even for me, is the person that's the troublemaker on the board. And we want to look at them as like, oh no, I've got a telephone call again from, obviously I won't use real names, from, Sue's calling me again, on this. But the problem is that we shouldn't be waiting for that phone call to come through from her, or that email to come through from her. We should be making the phone call out to them. And I think that if you are addressing them before they can address you, it is much easier, because they feel as if they've been heard from them. So that if you know that you've sent out the board minutes, or you're about to, if there's a subject on there, if you run the subject past them first and get what their viewpoint is on it, because all they really want you to know is how smart they are, how thoughtful they are, how thinking they are. And so you really need to be giving them kudos and saying, I know, Sue, this is something that's really near and dear to your heart. I know that this is, the election process, or the nominating process, or the finances, or whatever it is. If you address it right away, it usually takes the sting out of it for them. And then when it comes to the board meeting, if you're addressing it then in a board meeting, saying, hey, listen, this item number 2, be on the agenda, was really something that Sue and I have talked to in great length. And I understand, that there is a viewpoint out there on this. And I know that there's another viewpoint on this. And I think if we come to a decision on what the happy medium of that is, but calling it out so that it doesn't come as a surprise and you don't feel like you've been sabotaged, is really, for me, the way it has worked out well through the years. You end up making, what do they say, bring your enemies closer, or what's the expression, something about that. But that's sort of what it is, get to know them, and they have to be made your best friend in order to not have them be your troublemaker. And usually they're sometimes the hardest working people. They'll research and for you. And so you just have to be able to turn that around and make it to your benefit, not to your demise. What do you think, Marcy, on that with the troublemaker?
When I think of the phrase troublemaker, I have to say it with a smile. For those of us who have children who've lived through the terrible twos or the teenage years, you know, you have to sometimes have a smile about your troublemaker. It could be just someone, as Ann said, who has passion for your organization. And remember that as you use your personal life skills, whether it's Dale Carnegie, Stephen Covey, or Dr. Phil, kind of know what your response will be when they bring up an issue, so you can focus them back at hand to your strategic mission or what your board is focusing on. But do have a smile in your heart when you think of your troublemaker, because they are going to be challenging you and kind of keeping the board moving forward. We're going to go back. Give us a few seconds.
What happened there? Our slides are wanting to move faster than we are. I thought we talked pretty fast. Anyway, I think that we can address what we were talking about is whoops, you're really going ahead here, Marcy.
Yep, there we go. We're back.
There you go. To the person that's not doing the work. You know, I've fallen into this a lot, and I don't necessarily, I won't say, do what I say, not what I do. I end up, in order to get the job done, a lot of times I just do the work. And I know that that isn't necessarily the best answer. It's actually the worst answer, because it means that I'm doing their work for them, because I never want them to look bad at an upcoming board meeting, or I don't want them to look bad with the rest of the audience there. But sometimes, I mean, it obviously means that you have to stay in touch with this person a lot and trying to, you know, giving deadlines. But I think even more important than that, maybe you've assigned them to a task that they don't feel comfortable in doing. So maybe they were misassigned the task, and you should realize that and pull it out from them. Or maybe they need to have a co-supporter on this, somebody else who's going to help them do the work. That would be fantastic. But I think you do have to absolutely step in and say, how crucial is it for me to get this? I don't want them looking bad in front of the rest of the board members, especially if it was an action item. So you're going to have to do something. I end up doing the work. Marcy's probably smarter than me. Do you do the work, Marcy?
No, but we all end up doing the work.
Oh, there you go.
But one of the things too is there's something called episodic volunteering. Remembering that in today's world, many of our board members are living in a 24/7 world, and the demands on their time are so much more than they've ever been. And so finding out that, you know, is the person assigned to the wrong job? Could we do the work a different way? Could we clearly define their role and what will work for them right now? Someone asked about how to handle a negative Nelly in the chat. I've just got two examples, and it kind of crosses over to not doing the work. One is, again, having a conversation with your board president and with your board members that you're going to identify certain roles. And maybe some roles on a particular issue is you're going to ask people to be maybe devil's advocate or supporter. And the negative Nelly, making sure in advance you've identified that there's going to be times where you ask them to be the supporter, to say something positive. So getting people to play those different roles means that not one person is bringing out the negative in issue. You are addressing all issues from both sides and allowing them to participate in both sides.
Well, it kind of brings to Dan's point there in the chat. Dan said passion is better than indifference. And that's very true. I mean, that person is passionate, you know, they just, you know, are going about it in a different way. And that's, again, where you have to make your enemy your friend.
The other thing about a negative person is, again, as Ann talked about, identifying what their core issues are. What is their perspective, so that you make sure that you're addressing it head on. That brings me into the introvert. Again, when your board has reached a level that you're focusing on getting everyone's opinion, making sure that your person running the meeting, which is often your board president, is identified for the group that we're trying to hear all opinions, and that in advance, warning introverts that they will be called on. Maybe you assign certain names to people on your agenda so they know they're going to be asked to speak about a certain topic, so they're more comfortable in sharing their opinion, and making your board a safe place where people can be respectful and share ideas.
Well, that you can agree to disagree. I think that has to be one of the founding acknowledgments in the beginning of establishing your board. But I like what Marcy says, though, about the introvert, that you do have to reach out to that person, because the worst thing in the world is to call upon them spontaneously. So that you have really done your background work with them, and that you've reached out to them first of all, just to make sure that they're going to be comfortable in voicing their opinion, and or if they're not comfortable in voicing it, that you have voiced it for them. You can simply even say, you know, Sue and I had a conversation last week, and I was really pleased to know from you. Thanks, Sue, you know, for bringing up this and this point. So you are that person's voice then, which is I think extremely helpful, because you want to be able to, after a board meeting, be able to determine that you have heard or you've acknowledged everybody in that room. And I think that a lot of times we end up just letting the person who speaks the most be the one that you're hearing from, but you really have to make it a point to make sure that you have in your board meeting, you have addressed every single person in that room by some weight or measure. So what do you think, Marcy? I mean,
my tip for bringing more energy or excitement to your board is, again, and it may help the introverts, is working with your agenda to try to make it so that you're asking for the opinions of everyone. So identifying that on your agenda, that this will be a time where in discussion, you're asking for opinions. Another tip that kind of crosses over both from introvert into energy is, if you've not been using a consent agenda, there's a lot of nonprofit board training about consent agendas, thus leaving the business you have to take care of, the mundane, on the consent agenda, so you don't spend time and energy talking about it. You can focus on those issues that are more meaningful to your group.
Yeah, that's the consent agenda is very important, because that allows you then to get done with all of your business that is presented that you think is pretty much a slam dunk, and really be able to get into that planning and strategic outlook that you want to be hearing from your board members. Or just the fun. You know, if they're just sitting in a board meeting going, okay, yeah, I approve, yay, you know, yay, nay, you know, what's the board, you know, line item on this, that's pretty dang boring. So at least this way, if you've got a board that you're trying to energize and you're talking with one another, I think it's invaluable. So you have to allow time even during the board meeting for that, and even then after the board meeting. Sometimes I think the meetings after the meeting are more insightful even than the board meeting itself. So that's, and then I think later on, Marcy and I are going to talk about various ways that we can bring excitement and energy in activities to your board. But I think it's primarily, you've got to be able to make sure that all voices are heard at a meeting, and that will help with your energy level. And then, you know, talk about, I guess, you know, a couple of these are so negative on here, the troublemaker and the personality clashes. Marcy, how do you deal with the personality clashes? I mean, you're dealing, I mean, these board members, they're all high, you know, professional levels, and they all have their own opinions, and they're all have a passion for whatever it is that is the mission of the organization. And therefore, then personality clashes are something that's inevitable, but it's also, I think, a lot of times what brings us further along in the organization. So I think, Marcy, you've got some examples on that, right?
Highly encourage boards, if you start to have personality clashes on your boards, I highly encourage all nonprofit managers to deal with those head on, by, again, having a conversation with your board on the expected culture and respectfulness of being in that boardroom, and it's a safe zone. Dealing with any issues directly. There are many stories and examples of boards that have ended up with personality clashes causing such a rift or divide in the organization that they've ended up in court, or ended up, you know, having splinter groups. And so for myself, the awareness and dealing with them head on, I think, is an important point for nonprofit managers.
Right. Well, and what Marcy says is true. I do know of a number of organizations then that have split off from the parent company or whoever it was that they were with, and that's a horrible thing, because then obviously you're diluting the strength that you have in the industry. Now, on the other side of it, though, I have seen organizations, because of, I'll say, not necessarily a clash, but where they've merged then, because they realize that they are really going after the same audience, and therefore then they can do a lot of things jointly. And even if they don't merge as an organization, they can merge with the areas that they're both interested in. I'm trying to think of a group that I can say without divulging. I guess I can't. But anyway, their names. But the fact that you both are interested in children, and they're both interested in or cancer. So I think that you can go after do something jointly that then and not necessarily clash them by doing it. I guess that's about best example as I can give towards that.
So that brings me back to briefly talking about breaking the law. I encourage all
Never
nonprofits. I encourage
Never.
all nonprofits to annually do, as part of your board annual training, identify those situations where nonprofits can cross over and break the law. Make your boards aware of antitrust, of conclusion, of what they can do in terms of earning money for the organization and what they can't do. I think if you do that education annually for your board, you help keep yourselves clean and on the straight and narrow. Also, if your board involves a PAC, I think annually training people on what the laws are about political fundraising is really important.
Yeah, that's really important. If you're dealing with a pact, I mean, that has all rules unto itself, and you do have to be very careful. But there are other things in breaking the law. There are board members that are going to be asking you to spend money on things that isn't necessarily breaking the law, but it's not necessarily within the mission and scope of what your organization should be doing. So I think you really do have to define what your spending is, what is worthwhile to you. I mean, things, it's not breaking the law, but a lot of times you could have a president that wants to take people out to dinner and wants to be spending a lot of money. If that's the case, you're going to have to come up with something in your finances as a rule of thumb as to what it is that you can really be doing, so that person is not taking advantage of it. It's a very sticky area, but if you have the process and procedures, I guess is what it is, under your finances, and working closely with your finance chair and your board of directors. Actually, you may even have to approve spending like that. It's pretty important, because there have been, you talk about personality clashes, when a board member wants to spend hundreds of dollars on a dinner that not everybody feels is right, in view of the fact that you maybe want you're a charitable society and you're giving money to other organizations. So it's a tricky one, but I think you need to have rules and regs in order to not run into the problem with breaking gray areas of the law. And it's gray areas that most
For those of you who want more on this topic, please reach out to us and we can share with you some of the things that we use in educating boards for breaking the law, from the state of Michigan laws to laws that impact nonprofits nationwide.
Exactly. Look, we're just not going forward with our slides. Here we go. Interactive activities. Okay, we have like 10 minutes more, I guess, to go here. Interactive. You're going to get to know all of your board members this way. I think you can do some fun things. I'm going to jump down, or Marcy's going to go over with you some of the things you can do during a Zoom meeting. You can, what's the spinning board that you use?
So think of TV game shows and the spinning wheel, where you spin the wheel to win a prize. There are now those tools available to us that we can do on a Zoom meeting and do them virtually.
Right. We can send you the link for that if you're interested. So.
Anything else you want to say about fun? Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, fun. I love the idea. Marcy did recently a cooking class with her board. So that was totally a fun event. It had nothing to do with a board agenda or anything. And Marcy, why don't you explain how even that worked?
So
through Zoom. It was a cooking class through Zoom.
So in my local neighborhood, there's a wonderful gourmet grocery store, and they do a virtual cooking class. And they did it for our organization. We had a supply list that everyone could go to their local store and get. And it was very enjoyable. There was a recommended wine or a cocktail, but we got to have a live cooking class and interact with each other and have a lot of fun.
Well, and it was kind of cool. Everybody bought the ingredients in advance, so you weren't paying for those ingredients. Every individual paid for them, and everybody just had a nice time. The other thing that a lot of people are doing is probably no surprise to any of you is that they're doing happy hours. That's kind of fun, after work hours, or maybe morning mimosas. I don't know. It's whatever your level of fun is that you want to do with that board. But I think if you have to work in something that's fun like that, whether or not you just do a storytelling maybe before a board meeting that just says something that's exciting that's been happening, so that you just kind of get people in the mood for they're smiling, they're happy, and they're wanting to be on that call with you. During COVID, this is terrible because of the fact that we can't meet in person and have those kind of relationships. It's nice that we can at least recreate some of them through Zoom.
So please share with us if you have any ideas about having fun with your organization, or if you have times to bring in a little fun into your board agendas.
I like alcohol personally, but that's just me.
So we are going to, as we conclude, talk about 5 rules of board engagement. Where these 5 rules came from were a report done by the American Society Association Executives, looking at the annual report that's done by Marketing General, which is a great membership report done every year about membership in nonprofits, and then the McKinsey report, which is a consulting firm that often talks about highlights of what nonprofits are doing. So I'm going to cover these 5 rules and kind of give you examples of each. Again, please put anything in the chat if you have any questions.
Marcy, they do want to know where you get the information for breaking the law. So we'll have to get that and send it out afterwards.
So we're going to cover the 5 rules of board engagement. Again, the first rule is on board all over again. In today's world with COVID, I think our interaction with our boards and with our associations, as we still here in Michigan are living under the COVID-19 rules and regulations about gatherings, meetings, that many of us have found the things that we traditionally do may have to be done differently. To me, it's a new day, and this is really a time to redo your board orientation with every single board member, not just the new people, but to go over and do it with everyone. Often that orientation can be done somewhat in a group setting, but that personal connection can be really important.
It should also be in writing. Of course, I think every board position, of course, you should have it in writing as to what that role on the board, their role on the board is. So they know what their expectations are, your expectations are.
And don't forget, as we mentioned earlier, that outside voice, making sure that you have that student representative or that group that may not be currently on your board. They're part of it. The next item is clear and easy to understand communication. Making sure your board understands the communication process for members. How do questions get to the board? How do the board answer them? What are going to be your monthly or traditional board reports so they know what to expect?
And for that, I would also say, have somebody else read that communication, because a lot of times we write the communication ourselves and we understand it, but have an outsider read it and have them explain back to you what that communication says and make sure that it's clear and exactly the message that you want to get across.
So for communication, there should be some activities that boards do on an annual basis. The duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience you've probably heard about in working with your board education. If that's something new to you, please reach out to us and we'll share with you. But these are your board member responsibilities. The next one is helping your board work smarter. Now is the time, as we're living through COVID-19 and going through some tremendous change for many nonprofits, is to bring in new tools or resources, things that you can do that remove time wasters for your board members. If some of your traditional monthly reporting could be changed to a dashboard or to a streamlined report, or maybe you can use file sharing or some internet tools available for your members so they can work smarter and remove those time wasters. It's a time to try new things. Where do you get these ideas? Reach out to your colleagues, like this seminar that Troy Nonprofit is doing, and look for new ways that you can improve your board working smarter.
Well, if you aren't doing the consent agenda with your board, that would be one place to really begin.
And in terms of Zoom and virtual meetings, making sure that that engagement is there for your people and that they are using their time effectively with Zoom. It's almost like we have to jump to the point even faster in a virtual meeting. So we've talked a lot about engagement and activity, but again, making time to make sure your board is looking at strategy over day-to-day operations, moving that maybe to the front of your agenda, giving more background information on strategy so they can take a more active part in the conversation can be a really good difference. Hearing from the voice that's not usually heard, whether it's introverts or outside stakeholders, or even people outside of your organization. Ann, do you have anything to add?
No, that's very important. You can't just be listening to the people that think like you do. You have to be listening to the people that have additional ideas.
Lastly, on board engagement is look to the future. Making time to bring in that future view, the what ifs, what's happening in your profession or your industry, what is breaking news, what will it look like in 10 or 20 years, I think is an important part of board engagement.
We'll be out of COVID. I'm hoping anyway.
So
that's what we're going to do.
This slide is available to you. We're not going to go through each of the points, but it's kind of a summary of some of the things that you can try for developing your board and making them more active and engaged.
Lou has a question here. Any tips for accomplishing number 4? What was your